The rain was relentless that night, not the soft kind that whispers on rooftops, but the kind that hammers against windows as if trying to break inside. In a dimly lit attic room sat Alara, her hands trembling around the neck of a weathered violin. Its varnish was chipped, the strings slightly rusted, and a long, ugly crack ran down its body like a scar on the face of something once beautiful. She stared at it for what felt like hours. Not because she didn't know what to do with it, but because she knew exactly what it meant. This violin had been her soul for as long as she could remember. Every note she had played since she was 8 had carried her secrets, her hopes, her grief, and now it was broken. Not by accident, not by time, but by the one person she had trusted more than anyone else in the world. Earlier that day, the stage. Lights had been warm on her skin as she tuned the strings. She could hear the audience's chatter filtering in from behind the velvet curtains. Tonight was supposed to be her night. The night she would prove herself not just to the world, but to him, Adrian, her mentor, her friend, the man who had discovered her talent in the back streets of Marseille when she was just a shy little girl playing for spare coins. But just moments before she stepped onto that stage, she had seen him, backstage, his face pale, his hands gripping another violin, her violin. And in one swift motion, as if her dreams meant nothing, he had slammed it against the corner of a wooden crate. The sound of splintering wood had cut deeper than any insult. She had stood frozen, her heart pounding in her throat, unable to breathe as the man she had once called family turned away without explanation. Now in her attic, she held the broken instrument in her lap like the body of a fallen friend. Outside, the rain rode on, drowning out the world. Her chest burned with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. She didn't understand why. She couldn't understand how love for music could turn into betrayal so cold. She could have screamed. She could have cried. But instead, she closed her eyes and began to imagine the melody she would play if the violin still lived. Somewhere, deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end. The morning after the storm was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air is holding its breath. Alara had barely slept. The broken violin still lay on her desk, its strings loose and curling, the crack along its body seeming wider in the pale light of dawn. She reached out and touched the splintered wood, feeling the rough edges against her fingertips. Each jagged line felt like a sentence carved into her skin, a reminder of the moment everything had shattered. She tried to remember Adrian as he had been years ago, the man who had knelt in the street to listen when a timid little girl played for strangers. The man who had placed a single silver coin in her case and whispered, "You're not just good, you're rare." For years he had been her anchor, her guide, the voice that told her she could be more. And now he was the one who had torn her apart without a word. Alara dressed in silence. The city outside was waking, carts rattling. Over cobblestone streets, bakery doors opening with the scent of fresh bread drifting in the air. But she could not taste it. She could not feel it. She was moving through a world made of glass, terrified that the slightest wrong step would make it all come crashing down. She carried the violin to a small repair shop on Rue de Lune. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the old craftsman, Monsieur Varel, looked up from his workbench. His eyes, wise and soft, fell on the instrument in her hands, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he sighed deeply, as if the violin's wounds were his own. "This," he murmured, running a thumb along the crack, "is not an accident." Alara swallowed hard. "Can you fix it?" "I can," he said slowly, "but it will never sound the same. The heartwood has been damaged. The voice will change." She stared at him, her chest tightening. She didn't want a different voice. She wanted the one that had carried her through every lonely night, every hungry winter, every dream of standing beneath stage lights and feeling the world listen. But dreams didn't ask for permission before they broke. Monsieur Varel took the violin into his careful hands. I will do what I can, but you must decide if you can love it again, even if it is different. His words followed her out into the street. Love it again, even if it is different. They felt like more than just advice about an instrument. They felt like a challenge to her heart. 3 days later, the repaired violin was ready. Alara walked back to Rue de Lune with her heart thundering in her chest. The shop smelled of varnish and cedar, the air warm from the small stove in the corner. Monsieur Varel placed the violin before her on a velvet cloth. It looked whole again, but not the same. The color was slightly darker where the crack had been filled, the strings newer and tighter. She lifted it gently, feeling its altered weight in her hands. Her fingers found the familiar places on the neck, but the wood felt foreign, like shaking. Hands with someone you once loved but no longer knew. Play, Monsieur Varel urged softly. She did. The bow slid across the strings, and the sound that came out was different. It was still beautiful, but carried a new tone, deeper, sadder, like the violin had learned how to weep. She felt it in her chest, a trembling that spread to her hands. That night, she went looking for Adrien. She found him in a dim corner of La Fontaine, a cafe where artists and dreamers gathered. His back was to her, but she recognized the curve of his shoulders instantly. When he turned, his eyes widened in surprise. Or was it guilt? You broke it, she said, her voice low, trembling not with fear but with fury. Adrian's jaw tightened. I saved you. Saved me, she spat. You destroyed the one thing I had left. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Oh, Lara, you were playing yourself into a prison? That violin, your love for it was chaining you to street. Corners and dusty rooms. I wanted you to break free. Her laugh was bitter. You don't break someone to set them free. His eyes glistened in the candlelight. Sometimes you do. Sometimes it's the only way. She shook her head, tears spilling. You don't understand. That violin wasn't just wood and strings. It was me. It was my voice when the world didn't want to hear me. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the rain began to fall again, tapping against the window like a soft applause for the tragedy unfolding inside. Alara turned to leave, clutching the violin to her chest. She didn't know if she could forgive him. But she knew one thing. The music inside her wasn't gone. It had simply changed. Alara stood alone beneath the street lamp, rainwater dripping from her hair onto the violin's wooden body. She raised the bow, her hands trembling, and began to play. The notes that poured out were raw, cracked in places, but achingly beautiful. They were no longer the flawless tones of a perfect past. They were the imperfect truth of a survivor. People stopped to listen, not because the music was pretty, but because it was honest. And as the final note trembled into the night air, Alara lowered the bow, her heart both heavier and lighter than before. She whispered to herself, not to Adrien, not to the crowd, but to the violin in her hands. We're still here. The rain kept falling, and the city kept listening.